Welcome, welcome, everybody. It's very exciting to have this workshop with our own Jean Gendlin. And this workshop is sponsored by the FORP alias RFOP group. Now, I bet you all know what that is. To give you a little history, Jean and I have been in dialogue for about 30 years about focusing and relationality. At times, we're right in sync, and in other times, we're at each other's throats.
And both will happen today.
I made him promise, and he said he would be very positive.
I will be very positive.
We'll see. But for the sake of showing the in-syncness, Jean had left me a message saying, the problem that I have is that it sounds like you're saying that relationality and focusing are two different things with your RFOP. R and F aren't two different things. And so I was all prepared, and I said, I totally agree with you. That is absolutely true. And I had written this article called Two Interwoven Miracles about focusing and relationality. And I was going to Boston to do a workshop, and I also did a workshop for the Metro focusing people. How many Metro people do we have here tonight? Raise your hands. It's a wonderful, wonderful new group. And everybody else should go to Metro Focusing who hasn't been there. So I was doing a presentation for Metro Focusing about RFOP, and I went to that meeting and I said, as you can attest, in case Jean doesn't believe me, you can verify this. I said, it's not two miracles, there's only one. Relationality and focusing are one process. It's one interactional process. And as a result, we've changed our name. Instead of to RFOP, we've changed our name to FORP, Focusing Oriented Relational Therapy. So we have, and what we mean by that is that focusing is an orientation. Not only as a therapist am I oriented by my own focusing, my own in-touchness with the emergence, but also I'm oriented as a therapist by everything I learn about change and emergence from the focusing process. And so that orientation helps me to situate myself in time and space in the therapeutic session and in the therapeutic relationship. So I'm oriented by focusing, and I'm also a relational therapist, meaning that I emphasize the importance and the value of relationality in many, many ways. And we'll talk about some of that tonight. So FORP is sort of relational in two ways. It's relational and focusing on one thing, and then also there is an orientation toward all the ways that we work with the relationship in a relational therapy.
Hello, hello. Well, I want to say first that Lynn and I have been talking for a long time and arguing for a long time. So anything you have to say or ask about or comment on will be very welcome. It will help both of us clarify where this thing is at for us. So don't lose track of it. Don't, especially now, if I'm going to say anything either disturbing or unclear or whatnot, I'd love to hear some confused statement from you. What in the world can you mean by this, or something like that?
Yes, jump right in. Don't be shy.
That's right.
This is very informal.
Right. Don't wait till you have it all clear, because then you won't say anything, and we'll go home in the same shape we come, and we don't want to do that. Okay. Then I want to say, when Lynn and I are talking about clinical practice or therapy or examples, we never disagree. There is nothing we disagree about. Then as soon as she states her point of view in abstract terms, then I get all upset. So first I have to explain that. Okay. Back in 1954, I think it was. No, 52. So that's what? That's more than half a century ago. I joined a group of therapists. I was a philosophy student, but they said, yeah, that's interesting to have a philosopher. So I joined them, and I was in the practicum, and it was just a time when research findings were coming in. Research findings from a 3-year project, big thing. And Carl Rogers had predicted that the relationship would make a difference. The relationship would affect the outcome. We had a whole bunch of I just joined then. I was a green student. A bunch of outcome measures, all different kinds. And the research showed definitively that the relationship made no difference. So that was a great disappointment. But I do want to say, in my experience, somebody way back then tried to say that the relating is basic to what's going on in therapy. And I thought that too, but the research said no. So I went looking to see how had they measured this relational thing. Well, they measured it by classifying all the statements. And so there were statements talking about us, or the therapist, and they were classified relationship. And then there were statements about oneself and one's inner experience and all that, and they were classified not relationship. And how much relating there was going on made absolutely no difference. Well, I was in therapy at the time, and for me, that made perfect sense. I never talked about my therapist. I was much too shy to ever do that. Everybody called him by his first name, but I didn't. And I didn't call him anything else either. I just didn't. So I knew that when I walked in the door, before I walked across the room and sat down there, when I walked in the door, I was different. And that happened completely regularly. And so I thought, well, what I really want is I want to be like that when I'm not here, you know. So I said to myself, that's the relationship. And the statements aren't going to tell you anything about it. So from then on, for the next 20 years or so, I fought this battle in favor of relationships. Because at the time, and not many of you are old enough to remember that time, it was a time when psychology consisted entirely of individual differences. That's all they were interested in. Everything was individual. Everything was individual differences. Everything came out of the individual. If you had any relational stuff, it was projection. It was transference. And your doctor, you know, if you said to your analyst, Dr. Morrison, I love you, or Dr. Morrison, I'm mad at you, or anything like that, Dr. Morrison would say, that can't be. You don't really feel about me. It has to be your father or somebody else in your past. That was all that was permitted. And I had one client I had being a trainee who absolutely was driven crazy by that, because she loved Dr. Morrison, and she knew that she loved Dr. Morrison. She had never met anybody like that before, and Dr. Morrison could not stand it. So, again, in my own experience as a client, I knew that it's always both. It's always what's going on now, and the past is in there. If the past hadn't been the way it was, this wouldn't be going on this way now. The past is always there, and the present is always there too. But that's not how people understood it. And even when I went to make focusing instructions, which was revolutionary, and part of the courage it took to do that was a group of students that I worked with. When that research came out and it showed, first there was research to show that it doesn't change over therapy. Then we were very disappointed, because we thought that over the course of therapy people would do more and more inner touch making. At the time we called it PFC, PCF, preconceptual feelings. We thought were very important. Well, that didn't increase over therapy. Instead, you could predict from the first 2 interviews whether it was going to succeed or fail. Well, that was horrible, because that means people get together for 2 years and all this loving and care and effort and money and everything else, and you could predict from the beginning that it wouldn't do any good. So I went and did focusing instructions to get people to have preconceptual feelings. And then when that result came out, then people said, oh, this is for those people for whom it's indicated. The people who are already going to be successful with that kind of thing, those are the ones who should have this kind of therapy, and other people shouldn't. Because everything was individual differences. There were only individuals. There were no relationships. And then one day, and I don't know that I marked the day exactly, it all flipped over, and the pendulum went to the other side, and now we have only relationships. Now everybody's talking about dialogue and interaction, and there aren't any more individuals, there are only relationships. So you think I'm happy? I'm just as unhappy as I was before. And meanwhile, being a philosopher, I know where that comes from. That doesn't come from psychology or psychotherapy. It comes from postmodernism. They eliminated the subject, the human individual. And that was a good revolution to have if you accept that revolutions are like that. They turn everything upside down, and so nothing really changes. It's just upside down. So they were still thinking about everything the same way, but now they were rejecting the individual. And so in the postmodern philosophy for the last 25, 30 years, there aren't supposed to be any individuals. That gets rid of a lot of junk about how the individual is the source of everything and there aren't any relationships. But it puts in a lot of junk, because now there are only relationships, there aren't any individuals. Now if you say somebody, philosophers are very peculiar. This happens in philosophy all the time. Back in 17-something, they got rid of matter. And the famous Samuel Johnson misunderstood this, and he kicked a stone and he said, "There, I disproved the bishop's theory that there is no matter." He didn't understand that the Bishop Berkeley was changing the concept of matter, not matter. The same thing happens with the unconscious. People who see that the unconscious is a little homunculus, a little person underneath the person who knows everything you don't know, that's a stupid theory, so they say there is no unconscious. Well, that's silly. There is what they're pointing to with the word unconscious, but that concept isn't right. Do you follow me? And that goes on all the time. So now there aren't any individuals, but of course that isn't meant in the simple way that the man who kicked the stone took it. It's not meant to deny that you're sitting here and I'm sitting here, but it is a way of misunderstanding everything just the way it was before, only upside down. So now the individual would be some content that comes out, the source of all the content. Well, it's clear, no, that's not right. The source of all the content is clearly everything together, the culture and the interaction and the other people and you and everything else. So, yeah, we got rid of some bad stuff, and we also have some more bad stuff. So when Lynn sticks the R into FOT, there are two things that bother me about it. And as long as you know those, I'll be okay. One of them is the implication that, the old implication, that now there's only R. Now you can't have F anymore because there isn't any such thing. There's only relating. The postmodern people have it so that what happens in my therapy with you is a product of the stuff that you say and the stuff that I say. And I deny it. I say, no, I'm not a product. I'm not a product of what you say, and I'm not a product of what I say either, surely. It's a misunderstanding of what a person is to think of a person as content. The same misunderstanding that I was fighting in 1952 or 4, whenever it was. You can't measure the relationship by classifying the sentences, whether they're about the relationship or whether they're about the self. Doesn't tell you anything. Why not? Well, because the living process is not what we say. The living process is not content. The living process isn't even what we do either. The living process is always implicit. And you see where we start to agree, Lynn and I. It's an implicit, living is implicit. And then what you do and say from it, well, that varies. So you think if I get up and walk out now, that's all there is to me is getting up and walking out? You wouldn't think that. Well, neither is what I'm saying all there is to me, or all there is to you. So if I talk about the relationship, that's swell. But if I'm too shy to talk about the relationship, there's no relationship. Conversely, okay, so one thing that bothers me is the current cant, the current language bothers me just as much as the old language. We have to be able to think of living as a richer, much more intricate, much more complicated, implicit, ongoing, from which we speak. So right now I'm filling you up with my words, but surely you're sitting there, you're not just my words, you still know who you are and where you're going and many things that are more important than my words. And so, simply said, one thing that bothers me is the current language. So when Lynn and I talk about therapy, then the current language doesn't bother me. But as soon as she seriously makes statements in the current language, then I say, no, wait, that sounds like those people that don't agree with you. You know, those people that think there are no people. Lynn would never think there were no people. But when you say it that way, okay, the second thing that bothers me, perhaps even more, is that for people who don't know focusing-oriented therapy, it sounds like focusing-oriented therapy is intrapsychic, is all about going in. Well, we know that we can't make it on that. One would imagine from this kind of talk, not that any focusing therapist would ever do that, but you can imagine from the kind of talk that focusing-oriented therapy is not relational, which is absurd. Then it would be, what, just two people sitting in silence for an hour or 50 minutes? Or what? It would be a therapist saying, go focus and leave me alone, or something like that. I don't want to be bothered, you do it in there. It's an absurdity to think of focusing-oriented therapy as the opposite of relational therapy. Now, it also makes relational therapy quite empty. I'm not interested in the kind of therapy that, if I took the current people literally, there would be these two half shells that are somehow or other generating some content between them that amounts to two people, something like that. So now I've told you what I'm against, right? Good. Okay. Now, where I want to go from here is to say methods and theories. And that's not the same thing, certainly. Methods tell us what to do as therapists, and theories tell us why it works, or supposedly why it works. Methods and theories, I say, are all helpful, and we should learn from all of them. But they're desperately mistaken if you choose one of them. And currently that's still the style. We teach all these methods to the students, and then we expect them to go out and shape people's heads in just triangles or trapezoids. They're supposed to choose one method. So I'm saying, no, don't choose one method. Know all the methods. Each method can sensitize you to very important things. If you know the method, don't do it, but you know it. So then, when that kind of thing comes up, you have a repertoire of things to do. So methods are good for repertoires of things to do. And I love every method that I ever learned, and I would like to learn some more of them. And in that spirit, I am learning some things from the relational people, because it gives me more things I can do when I'm stuck, and it also encourages me to do that kind of thing more. And so here's the positive of it. Especially those of us in the focusing-oriented, I forgot to say that focusing-oriented therapy is a clumsy title, isn't it? But I fought for it. Because at the time that book came out, and we started to have a kind of therapy, the Germans were years ahead of us. They already had focusing therapy everywhere. Focusing therapy was all over. And I couldn't stand focusing therapy. What would it be? So we've battled for a year or so, and we settled finally on focusing-oriented therapy, which may not mean anything to other people, but to me at least, it means that you do anything and everything that was ever helpful for anybody, but you do it in a focusing mode. That means you are in touch with focusing levels in you, and you invite help the client to get in touch with deeper levels of them. Yes? Okay. So my second point wants to be, in therapy, as a therapist, don't do a method. If you do a method, my burlesque of this is that you're really saying, I am a Gestalt or whatever therapist. I'm a focusing therapist. I'm a whatever, relational therapist. If you come to me, you're going to do Gestalt, okay? If you don't like it, go to somebody else. That's not an attitude to have towards a human being who is sitting there. So completely the opposite. When I get ready to see somebody, and I may be in all kinds of bad mood and upset and troubled and whatever, but in 5 minutes my client will come, I get ready for that. And that means another human being will be sitting there. And then I become the chair, the person in the chair. This is a very big chair, and I'm a very small person. But I know how to be in the chair. So then I take all my own stuff that's been bothering me and I put it here, and I take all the methods that I know and I put them there, and I am armed, right? I know a lot of methods, I know a lot of things I could do, so I won't be stuck, don't worry, but here's my armament, and then I'm open. And then somebody is sitting there. And I'm open, I'm waiting for them. They're somebody. And they live in a world that's skewed to mine, it's different. And so I'm waiting. And What am I doing when I'm waiting? Am I relating or am I focusing? Right? Just like I, as a client, when I walked in the room and I was already different, was I relating or was I focusing? Don't divide that. That doesn't make any sense. So then I am relating directly. Now my client may or may not be able to relate directly, may or may not be able to look at me even. May be like I was as a client, too shy to do any kind of overt thing. But that doesn't matter. I'm here, and I know there's somebody in there. Now, currently they're trying to tell me there's nobody in there. There's only whatever you're going to do and whatever they're going to do. That's not true. I know there's somebody in there. And I know there's somebody way in there, even if it may take a long time for that person to get in touch with those levels inside. And until they do, we aren't really going to know a whole lot. Would you grant? I mean, this person's going to tell me their world, and that's a lot, and I have to learn it. But in terms of what's really wrong, we're not going to hear from because what's really wrong is always around the corner, and then again around the corner, and then down a little, and then around that corner. And unless you go those steps, you don't really know. Because each person is this unique world that's beyond the common world, which is what I'm saying these days about Barreau, that language makes you think as if the language says what the language wants to say, the common phrases that everybody knows. And you have to use those, you think, and then you just hope that the phrases will accidentally, indirectly sort of say what you want to say. You don't have to do that. You can go past there and go directly to where you are alive and speak from there. But it's some trick to do. And some people will come to therapy and they already know how to do that. But some don't. So I am relating to the person in there from the start. And what do I do? Well, whatever I think is helpful. So routinely, while I don't know anything, I want to respond mostly reflectively so that this person has the experience of being seen. And since nobody does that, if I do it well and if I'm lucky, the person will go home even after the first interview and say, they may not have any words for it, but there will be some kind of implicit effect. And I want that all the time. But then again, I may not only reflect, because only reflect is making a method out of listening. You see, I'm client-centered. You come here, you're going to get back whatever you say. That's all I do. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. No, that's not listening. Listening is listening for the person in there. And so when something comes from there that says, I don't know, something that may move me to say something quite unusual or quite listening unreflectively. And then I also know that when I say those things from me, and like I thought yesterday, if I'm going to demonstrate with somebody, you'll see this right away. Because the first thing I do when I demonstrate with somebody in front of a big group is I relate to them in terms of trying to make them comfortable. So I say, which maybe I don't get to do if we don't have time, but I say, well, I'm going to ignore them now, and various other things like that. And I say, you don't have to say everything. What comes in you, keep it for yourself and say only the part that you want. And right away you see a person go, easing there when they come all tense to demonstrate with me. So what am I doing there? I'm not reflecting, right? I'm not stating back what they said. I'm saying me and where I am and letting the person get a feel of me and where I am. And then if what I said was wrong, then I find for years now, almost all the years I've practiced, I find that doing something wrong, if you can catch it, if you know it was wrong, it's better than if you hadn't done it. because you go to try to fix it. And first you fix it by understanding it. Oh, I see. To you that meant da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, I didn't know that, but I see now. Oh, yeah. And then I may even fix it further and go further steps with it. So that I am no longer, well, I don't know that I ever was, worried about doing the wrong thing. But I do have a hangover from client-centered therapy of being still relatively shy. Like I'll let a silence go for a long time. But then again, I don't, so that's not right either. I don't let a silence go for a long time. I want to be clear in the silence that we are connected. So if we're silent and the person is clearly moving inside, oh, then I'm satisfied. But if the person is looking around for sort of help me, I'm stuck, I'm not going to leave them there, right? Whatever I say, it doesn't go any further, or are you stuck, or was that bad what we did, or something or other. And then whatever I say is bound to be wrong. I'm not interested in saying something right. I'm interested in getting something right from the person. So this is my chief point, really. There is a person there, and if you will listen, you can tell that what comes from the person back at whatever you said is that's them. And what you said was just an invitation to them, or reaching for them, or looking for them, or whatever it is. Anything I ever say is like that. Then when I hear back, oh, well, then I know better, right? Then I've heard from them. So I'm denying that there is no person there, and that what we're doing or being is some kind of co-created product of the two of us. I'm saying, yeah, it takes the two of us. It takes me to say something so that something will come back. But that what comes back lets me know where we are. Now, suppose I say something new that wasn't part of what my client had thought, and I teach all my clients indirectly by, if I say something and then they're sort of saying, well, that isn't quite right, and then again you see why it isn't quite right is because I just wave that away. I say, never mind, don't get stuck with what I said. What should be said? And so after a while, my clients do this too. I start to say something that's not right and they go. Because they know that I'm not interested in what I'm saying. I'm interested in what is actually there. On the other hand, when I say something surprising and different than they had, but it's right, and my client says, oh yeah, da-da-da-da-da-da, right? Then what I said becomes their own. Then often, with relief, I will say, oh, well, if it's right, I'll say it again, and I do. Because if it's right, then we want to stay there for a minute, not run onto something else. So my point is that even if I contribute the content, even if I contribute the interpretation, the content, or whatever you want to call it, when it's right, it becomes my client's own. And if it doesn't do that, then it doesn't take. So then it was just an invitation. Then I say, well, what would be right? Go see. And then if they can go see, they do that. They go see. And if go see doesn't mean anything to them, well, then we go on some other way. And there the R is very welcome in FOT. Because the more things that we can do when somebody is not able to go in like that, the better. Because every time we do something, then we can point to where they were in touch with themselves. So focusing is a broad thing, and instructing people to focus is a very narrow thing. And mostly in therapy, I don't do it. I don't instruct people to focus. I invite them. I say, what comes here when you say that? And that to me is a huge, wonderful thing that works with half the people, and I recommend it highly to you, whatever your orientation is. If you wish your patient would go in and be more in touch, just say, what comes to you here as you say that? And then half the people will go right down, including very upset people and inner city children and all kinds of nonverbal people. They will go right here and be surprised that you care about it, if it's the first time you've said that. But they will go right there, and your whole therapy will deepen immediately. The other half of a typical patient load will say, what? And so you say, never mind, because it doesn't mean anything to them to say what comes to you here, you know. But you can get away with it once. I mean, if you start to push it, don't. That's not therapy. Then you're not responding to this person here. Because there is somebody in there, and what I'm really interested in from start to finish is that person in there. I'm working for that person. And so it can't be that my method is limited to people who can do that. Nowadays, a lot of clients come to me and they know about me and focusing, so they think they have to focus. And oh my God, what if I can't focus? And so then I laugh and I say, oh no, I'll show you that by and by. But there's a million other things we can do other than focus, for God's sakes. Right? So that's where I get sore when people contrast the going in silence with the interaction, because all of focusing is interaction. And when I'm alone focusing by myself, then I am relating to myself. And unfortunately, the relationship that I have to myself isn't always that good. And partly I'm still relating to my parents and all kinds of things, but I'm focusing as a human being, and a human being is always relational. It's always relating. And when you're alone relating to yourself, you're double relating, because you're relating to yourself and you're also in a relational climate. That's why the focusing attitudes are important, if you can manage them from the book. But really, you need a partner. And with a partner, focusing always goes deeper. And I always brag about my research project of 1,000 runs on the same subject, because I got deeply involved in research for many, many years. So I think it's very dramatic to say, I have a research project in which I ran the same subject 1,000 times. Can you imagine a subject standing still for that? Nobody has a research like that, but I do. I have the same subject on the same day, in the same climate, with the same diet, with everything controlled. It's an ideal research. And that's me, of course, focusing by myself and then focusing with my partner. And there is a huge difference. And it's perfectly true that with this partner, certain things can come, and with that partner, other things come, not those things. But they're both of them mine. They come out of me. And it's true that the way my partner is makes the difference. But they're both of them my response. They're not the way I interpret the words co-created. But they certainly come because of the co. Okay, there I'll stop.
Good.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to share with you a little bit about the relational emphasis that we've been developing. And I gave out a continuum, which Gene said he was going to fight with, and I said,
move the other mic closer.
Your mic is not so.
let's see here. I'm going to have some trouble, Charlotte, holding this thing and dealing with this continuum at the same time.
Oops, okay, let me move this.
I don't know if I can do this.
I'll hold it. I'll just bring a chair over.
Oh, okay.
Can you see why I would object to the continuum as different from whatever is right about the continuum? Can you make that distinction? I want to be both positive and argue with it. Go ahead.
Okay. Now, this thing has to be right up here, which is very difficult.
This is for the video, and this is for...
Yes.
Okay.
Can everybody hear me? Does everybody have their continuum? Good. This is a continuum, and I want to assure Jean, this is not a philosophical or theoretical continuum. It's a continuum of therapist responsiveness. And it is a continuum of I have here a keyboard because one of the people, Monica, in our Monday morning group said, well, it's like a piano keyboard. We're playing all of the notes, and I just love that. So if we picture this as a kind of piano and the therapy relationship as going all over this, this keyboard and following the melody, both of the people, as Jean says, both people are trying to make a relationship for the one in there, for the one deep down. And we do that on this side through carefully reflecting what the client is saying, encouraging the client to pause, to find something here, as Jean says. The silence is important. The attitude of receptivity and of quiet is very important in these moments. And on this side and this side are all equally relational, but they look different. This side, the therapist and the client, are actively talking to each other. They're playing with each other. I would never say they're co-creating. But let's say they're playing together, and they're expressing themselves together. This side is an expression of the two people together, engaged with each other, and this side, this moment, is a moment of the client finding her own experience in that moment. Now, of course, this side is also the client's own experience. And this side also, of course, both people are deeply involved with each other. But the keyboard has a different flavor and different activities. All of these activities are meant to bring out and develop the client, as well as, I would say, as well as the dyad, as well as the pair, as well as making a new kind of relationship. And the new kind of relationship fosters a new kind of being, so that when Gene felt in the presence of his therapist a new self, it was a new kind of relatedness that made a new sense of self. And so this whole keyboard is trying to find a new relatedness that makes a new sense of self. Now, in the middle of the continuum, I have asking into poetizing. This side here, the middle of the keyboard, the therapist is actively involved with her or his own felt sense and finding the right kind of images and words that will invite what's there. The therapist, it's not good enough, and Jean will agree with me here, it's not good enough to try to help the client to make a better relationship with themselves. It's not good enough to say, can you find compassion for that there? The person is having a lot of trouble finding compassion for that there. What's helpful is for the therapist to find compassion, and then as the therapist is interested in accepting, welcoming of that in there, that deep one inside, then of course that makes a relational togetherness that has a receptivity to that. So in the middle here, the therapist is making a relationship, inviting, welcoming, invoking, inviting that one inside with her own words, felt sense, images, and metaphors. And on this side of the keyboard, the therapist and the client are in conversation, in play. I'm going to give you just a tiny little example. There was an example of Lois Greifer from our Thursday group, and I don't think she's here today. No, she's not here. She gave an example of improvisation in which her client was saying, "Oh, I'm so I'm so timid. I'm such a wimp. I can't even drive in New Jersey traffic. I can't even find my way. I just don't know. I just can't be an adult here. Every adult can drive a car in New Jersey." And so the therapist, all of you are focusing people are very familiar with this problem of what we've called the critic. The therapist said to her, "Yes, I see what you mean, but where are all these people?" So the client looks up and says, "Well, they're not sitting in this chair." And so then the therapist laughs and said, "Well, they're not sitting in this chair." And so there's a whole different feeling in that playfulness, and the session proceeds from a very, very different place. That's what I'm calling improvisation. The improvisation isn't necessarily, sometimes it can be a drama, sometimes it can be a sand play, sometimes it can be role play, it could be anything, but it doesn't have to be. It can be simply finding a way of being engaged with it from a different place. And so there's a kind of new living further that is happening through this whole keyboard. But we're doing the living further on this side by engaging together in a different way than is possible to come from the client alone. The therapist is introducing something. The therapist is wanting to know what kind of interaction is this one down here, this inner self. What kind of interaction is needed? And there are all kinds of interactions that are needed by people, all kinds of relational experience that's needed. Sometimes it's needed to have a witness. Sometimes it's needed to have a playmate. Sometimes it's needed to have the feeling of someone that's bigger than me that can take care of me. Sometimes it's needed to have the feeling of a likeness. Sometimes it's needed to feel deeply appreciated by the other. Sometimes it's needed just to be silly together. There are many kinds of interactions that this one down here is calling for, that the therapist is sensitive to and wanting to be able to be free to go all over this keyboard. So that's what I'm going to say here. And that was only 10 minutes. So we're a little bit.
I'll ask you some questions.
Yes.
Because we're going to have dialogue now, right?
Yes.
And
now
not very long. We're going to let them in very soon.
Right. We're going to have some dialogue, and then we're going to let them in, and they're going to be part of our dialogue.
Yes, and we're both eager for you to come in. So we don't need to say much. I want to first say that what Lynn is teaching here is good stuff. And if you don't know it, learn it. Then I want to disagree with it, right? I don't disagree with it as stuff that we, coming from listening, tend not to know how to do very well.
Which is the stuff that coming from listening, you don't know how to do very well, just to
Those
clarify
lovely things
for
that you
people?
just laid out.
Playing, engaging,
and engaging in a certain way, and
finding inviting a conversation that's touching and
yes,
and gripping and meaningful.
any of those things. You want those in your repertoire so that when you are there sort of open without applying a method, they will come to you. And then the other thing is that you don't, in my opinion, you don't have to reduce your concept of psychology just to that. That's what theories tend to do. They want to sell you, and methods too. They want to sell you on the fact that therapy works just for this reason, just because of this thing, and just do this thing, and then you're doing therapy. And so the percentage of success is roughly the same all the way across all the wildly different things. Doesn't matter if you do guided imagery, or if you do role play, or if you do whatever you do, because so many of these methods are done just as methods. This is what I do. I don't take Lynn to mean it that way. Okay, so then I don't disagree. Where I disagree is on the keyboard notion. I want to say you can only play part of the keyboard at a time. I think is an orchestra. You can't explain an orchestra, right? The reason people go to hear an orchestra is because even the tape is not anything like what it sounds like when you're surrounded by the sound of the orchestra. That's really the main difference I have. But then it gets down into the detail. So Lynn said that when I walked in the room and I was already different, that was a new self. I'm saying, no, that was me. Now, it was very new to me because when I was, 3 days old already, part of me got very discouraged and didn't ever recover. But that's the point I'm trying to make, is no, that's not a new self. That was me. And
Can I, do you want me to respond to that, Jean?
yeah, if I could just sum it up somehow. It's or when somebody is focusing and they arrive somewhere, I will say, oh. So is that relational or is that focusing? It used to be that we tried not to react to the content because it was like saying, well, when you get this kind of a thing, then we approve, and therefore you better get this kind of thing all the time. Now I'm through with that. I like to show my response to everything that goes on. So when the silence is too long, I may cough or move around noisily in my chair because I don't want to be lost track of. I want to be there. So to me, the person focusing, even silently, is just as relational as it is when we play, and we hope that the focusing, that the person reaches inside themselves more. So for me, that comes from the inside. Yes, it's your turn.
I like your idea of the orchestra. Of course, there are many instruments and many dimensions. And of course, you know, Jean, that I'm not talking about a method. You know that.
No, that's right.
I am talking about skills, though.
Yeah.
I have a new idea
Yes,
that along in contemporary psychoanalysis, we've decided that technique is out, because technique is sort of a one-size-fits-all. It used to be thought that if you had the right interpretation, the right technique, that then that's what was needed. And in a new sensibility in psychoanalysis, there's many different papers and discussions about how we don't believe in technique. But then that leaves young clinicians learning all of these theories, sitting down with difficult patients in clinics, saying, what do I do? What do I do? And being completely at sea. My idea is that every theory has a something to do that's implied by the theory. And the something to do I call skills. And skills are different than techniques because you have a repertoire of skills like a musician does. But then when the musician is improvising, all of those skills, all that knowledge of scales, knowledge of the instrument, is all in there. But the musician isn't necessarily thinking about all of those things. So that's what I'm calling skills. Right. It's very important to have skills, and this continuum gives just a little sort of sketch of the kinds of skills that we want therapists to develop. The skills of helping people to find themselves inside in simple ways, like, how is that here? And the skills of asking into something. What is that like when you say that to me? What was that just happened now between us? That kind of question. Or, oh, that sounds like the thing that you were saying the other week about blah, blah, blah. Or it's a such and such kind of feeling. And then waiting to see if that does something. Or the skills of back and forth talking about what I call talking about the you and me of the relationship, which is very, very important thing to be able to do, and very, very difficult to do in our culture, very rare to do. So it's very rare to be listened to the way client-centered people listen and Jean listens. And it's also very rare to have the kind of intimate exchange where you can talk with another person about your deep longings having to do with them, your disappointments with them, your wishes for them, to try out new behaviors with them, to fight with them when you've never fought before, to relax with them when you've never relaxed before, to talk about how meaningful that last thing was, whatever it is that happened between you. When Jean was so shy in the beginning in therapy, we would want a therapist that would be aware of his shyness and be very tender with that shyness.
Be very what?
Tender with the shyness. And also want maybe to bring out a little bit more, to find a little more freedom there. I also want to say that I agree that it isn't it's not that a new us makes a new me, but as I develop, there's the sense of new experience and new living, and there's every moment a new kind of me. But of course that me is all me. But the feeling of a new me, such an important feeling, the feeling of being reborn in this moment, the feeling of something new in me just coming to life, and how that happens. Jean, want to say something, or shall we ask them?
Well, I don't have much to say that I haven't already said. I wouldn't like my therapist to have decided what I needed, which is one of the dangers in theories and methods. But other than that, I would agree that it would have been nice if he could have done that. Then he probably would have seen me shrink down into my chair and he wouldn't have done it again. But I would say, from my point of view, it would be good for him to know how to do that. He didn't know how to do that. But then again, he was extremely relational because he was always like this, trying to hear and whatnot. The difference that I'm looking for is to have, what I mean by the orchestra is to have the relating and the method, any other method, together. you wouldn't want somebody to relate to you not from deep down inside on Tuesdays, and then to sit there silently and not feel you while they're going inside themselves on Wednesdays, if you see what I mean. Or in the first half of the hour, in the second half of the hour. Because you would be just as much there every moment with them while they're silent. And if not, then do something. Make a noise at least. Don't let them sink over there in autism, because now we're focusing. And then later relate from yourself, all right, but don't not need them to go inside to get the depth of what's going on, because now we're relating. And you don't mean it that way. When you say we're playing, you include the fact that you would like your person to sense themselves playing. And not just playing with you, but sense themselves playing. And that's as much as you're telling us. That,
Right.
oh, this might be something, it's a new way, or at least a fresh way, that they can feel themselves.
Let me
So
just...
the difference and the sameness should be relatively clear, but let's open that up.
Okay, let me say just a couple of things there. One thing is that that whatever we're doing on this keyboard, we want to be checking, and we learn that from focusing. And so it's wonderful. I don't know if Lois, with her improvisation, said, "How is it now to the room seems different?" That would, I don't know if she said that, but that would be the kind of thing that we know to do, to say, what happened there, or how is that now, or some way of the finding the place from, and what's changed and what's needed from there. So that checking is always an important kind of thing, although you may wait until after the whole play is sort of has its own form before you do that. The other thing I just wanted to say is when you said you don't want the therapist to decide what you need, there's a principle that we have in focusing about putting something out or living something and being so sensitive to, is it needed? I'm doing this, but I know that this isn't going to be the specificity of the implicit intricacy. But I'm saying, oh, I think this is needed, and I make that movement. And then, as Jean said years ago, and I always remembered this, a sensitive therapist isn't one that knows. A sensitive therapist is one that pays very, very close attention to the next thing that happens, not only verbally, but non-verbally, after the therapist is doing something, being something, attending to something. And so that's a very, very important principle. And I don't see these as two separate methods at all, but as one whole way of making a relationship with this one deep inside. So now let's listen to you. Yes.
So related a bit to the comment from Jean about the person feeling herself playing, and to the thing being a whole.
Yes.
The way I can follow the keyboard is a sense that what this is about oscillating with the different modes or different types of resonating. And one pole is resonating inside, resonating within oneself. Another, that's just the ownness. Then the other part is the we-ness is resonating with another person. And that, the keyboard, in a way, the way I see it, is a pendulum, where there are some moments where the oscillation is in the resonating within oneself. So partly it's a part where the therapist is training the client to resonate within themselves. Other moments where that capacity is there, and maybe there's the experience of playing together, resonating with each other. And maybe another swing of the pendulum when you go back to the ownness is that sense of sensing or feeling that you have been playing. And that, the pendulum can go between both, and that there is a connection, between the focusing, that you do throughout, the relatedness to other and the relatedness to self, and it's about developing the capacity for resonance.
Well, I would both agree with it and argue with it the way I do with that. I think in terms of what a therapist does, no, I don't think. No, let me just argue with it. I think you said it quite well. I wouldn't like the implication, which you didn't mean. Nobody ever means this, but you said the implication that when I am playing with you as a therapist, then I am not resonating with myself. Then I don't feel myself. When in fact, the way change happens in therapy, I think, is precisely that I am feeling myself while it's going on with you. And for some months at least, at first when I leave, I don't think that. I can't even grasp that that happened very often. All I know is that it was, I liked it or something. So I'm saying that we resonate more and more and more during the interaction. And we become more interactional during the time that we sit silently, because this other person is actually going to understand me.
I'd like to say that it's that the more we are connected to ourselves, the more we're connected to the other, the more we're connected to the whole universe, or to that whole big thing. It's about, therapy is about that wanting the experience of connectedness that makes me feel more myself and more of the sense of belonging to you and to the whole big thing. But there is a kind of attention oscillation, that I may be paying attention to what's coming here at one moment, and the next moment I'm looking at you and I'm seeing what's about to happen in you, and I'm paying attention to you. But at the same time, I'm registering in here what I'm seeing on your face. I see you nod your head, and I feel that in here. And then I feel the whole room somehow there.
So a shift in focus, that you're developing, you're increasing your ability to be with self while with other, and vice versa. But maybe we're talking about very small shifts in focus, where during one moment, you're going to be a little bit more focused in the experience of being with other while feeling self. And then digesting that, losing a little contact with the other, and doing this back and forth.
I would agree with that, and I encourage therapists to make a place in therapy for their own experience of going inside and being quiet for a minute, especially when you're stumped. I think it's a wonderful thing in the middle of a heated interaction in therapy to say, let me just take that in for a minute, or let me just see where I am with this right now, and then to just go inside for a second and sort of leave. You're still, of course, with the client, but you're paying attention to yourself differently, and then you can come back to the client in a new way. So I like that sense of the attention being oscillating. Anybody else? Yeah.
I wonder if Jean could say how he would express the goal of therapy and contrast that answer for what his goal for any given session of therapy might be.
The difference between the goal of therapy and the goal of...
Any particular therapeutic session, individual session.
Oh. I wouldn't have any idea. Because, no, really, because what happens is so from around the corner, is so out of the implicit that, I may think it's a little thing and it's brought what we're working for. Or vice versa. I may think, oh yeah, this is a moment when it's really happening, and it didn't.
Is the goal of, there is no difference between the goal of therapy. What is the goal of therapy?
No, it's not that there's no difference between the goal of therapy and the goal of a session. I understand what you're saying. It's just that I don't know either one of those. Because what is going to happen is so much better than what I can dream up, that it would be just a terrible thing if what I thought was the goal was all that's going to happen. And when that works, I get used to putting that first, so that I have a bunch of kids in class and I need them to pass the exam, but still I put them first.
So the goal of therapy is to help maximize the other person?
Well, I said it without thinking. It's something like that.
Okay.
If you add dots after it, sort of, something like that. No, is that all right? But then that doesn't preclude the fact that I get expanded too.
No, that's what I was going to say. So, but it brings it back to is it the relationship, or is it, it brings it
Well,
back
it would
to-
just be horrible if relating meant that you're not in touch with yourself. And, I know you didn't mean it that way, but if I do that too sometimes. I say, let me just take that in for a minute. But it would be terrible if relating, when I don't say, let me take that in for a minute, is without my taking that in. That's absurd. And that's the way it always sounds to me when people say, even what you said. It's like, well, there's a shift in focus. I know there's some kind of a shift. I know what you're trying to say. But I wouldn't want to say that relating and being in touch are a keyboard. Because the way that's, and I see that all the time. I just got a paper 3-4 weeks ago from someone who knows focusing very deeply and is very much involved in it for many, many years, wrote this really good paper in which he's talking about going in and what that's like, and relating and what that's like, and ends up saying the two things can help each other. So then at the end, I'm all upset, because that means relating is empty and focusing is isolated. So you switch back and forth between being empty and being isolated? You don't mean that. And of course you don't. I know you don't.
Charles, you were wanting to say something.
Going back to a phrase that Gunford used a long time ago, although I'm not sure whether it captures all of it.
But he spoke about a shift in psychoanalysis from sort of instinctual control of Freud stuff to the rebirth and growth of an authentic self in an authentic relationship.
Who was this, Eric, from?
Guntrip.
Oh, Guntrip, yes.
A rebirth of an authentic self in an authentic relationship. And of course, that doesn't speak specifically to this issue of whether we go in or we go out or we're with ourselves or with the other
Yes, that's
in any
right.
particular moment. But there's that whole sense of we're both here, we're both real, we're both in a relationship, and we're both
Yes.
growing and
Yes.
born.
Yes. And I would say that's the practical clinical side of it, is when it doesn't feel like that, then there's no focusing and no nothing but to fix the relationship. Because usually when I'm working, it's smooth. I'm in touch. I'm connected. The person is connected. We are connected. The minute that breaks, I don't believe in focusing. I wouldn't want, unless it didn't break. If the person can still go in and see what went wrong, yeah, sure. But if it's between us so that we're no longer connected, I wouldn't want focusing to continue. Yes.
I just wanted to make one little comment here about the session and the goal of therapy. Charles is bringing in the rebirth of the authentic self, which I love that metaphor, as you know. But there's also the idea of development that's very important in terms of the development of the moment in focusing, where you're attending to that minute detail of development of the moment and the development of what new is trying to come, and you're fostering that, and you're helping it, and you're pulling it out, and you're fully with that. And then there's the sense of the development in the whole project of the therapy, of the person, of the client, and the development of the relationship, the development of how we are together. And we didn't used to be able to navigate this and this and this, and now we can. After 2 years, now we can do that. We never could do such and such, and now we could do that. And then there are the development of trust, which is something between us. The development of resiliency, the development of spontaneity, and all of these things are of the self and also of the relationship, of both at the same time. But the idea of development is very important to me, and I wanted to bring that in with Charles's rebirth.
And growth.
And growth, oh yes, growth. Good. Yeah, I'm not going to see you. Those of you who know me know I have poor vision. Just chime in.
I have two questions. I don't know if they're related to each other. One is in kind of boning up for this evening and reading about your statements about relationality and being rather, and I think making a distinction between implicit and explicit is very important in this. And that should be said. But I'm so amazed by the fact that while we're all being perceived by the clients we're sitting with, we have very little idea as to how we actually appear in terms of how we're coming across at any given moment. We may think we know what we seem like, but only if we've seen ourselves on videotape if we can bear that. I spent 3 years looking at other therapists on videotape. I could barely bear that. It's just extraordinary that we don't know. We think we know how we're coming across, but how we're actually coming across is being subjectively perceived, which means almost all of the way we're being perceived is subjectively perceived, and we really can't know it very well. Just wanted to say that. But while that's going on, let's say, I'm not ideally able to disembed in a given moment when I don't know what I'm doing in a session and ideally focus. So it's a kind of philosophical question. If I'm caught and I imagine that I must be experiencing something, but I can't sense anything in that moment.
Now wait, say that again. If you're
It
caught,
sounds a little crazy, but
if you're caught,
it's
say
not as
that.
if I can exit the scene, do some neat focusing, and come back and know what I am experiencing. Often things are happening way too quickly for that to happen, and
Yes.
I can slow them down
Yes.
and say to somebody, let's both take some time here and try to get a sense of what we're in. Fine. But if we can't, and our own focusing is actually not occurring, because we're not able to carry our experiencing forward in that moment, and yet we know we're in something. That's probably the way we are being perceived most of the time, right? We're always in a flow of something that has not been articulated. Isn't that the case?
Well, I start at the end. It's true that you can always articulate further,
Yes.
and so it's always the case that you haven't articulated it beyond where you articulated it. And you don't have to articulate it at all. Most of the time, it's sufficient for me to stay in touch with myself to say, and then it says, and I say, oh. And that kind of dialogue with myself goes on all the time. And I mostly don't even, it's quite different if I have to say to myself, well, let's get through this hour because I'm not going to be able to hear really from myself.
That's right, until
Right?
12 o'clock tonight.
Then at least I know that. So, I don't want it to go too bad until I can. But that doesn't happen very often because most of the time what is militated by the interaction is sort of familiar territory to me pretty much. But that would be an exaggeration if it was all the time. I can look back to last year and say, how could I have done that? So it's right. So I know what you're saying now. Where were you going with the philosophical question?
Well, I guess,
Oh, how we're perceived. Oh,
how is it perceived? Because we're not poised at the point where we're taking a focusing step. We haven't found the words that move our experience
we don't have to
forward.
find words. It's enough to say, oh, well, oh, oh, oh. Or my famous oof ah thing, some of you know, where if my client attacks me, I feel like, oh, because I've been a wonderful person until now, and all of a sudden I did this terrible thing. And then I realize, oh, my client is getting stronger. She couldn't have done that before, and here she is at this. Oh, so I've gone from oof to oh without any much articulation. It's not much articulation. It's just like, oh yeah, and well, I'll bind up my wounds later. Meanwhile, I'm excited that she's getting stronger, and I can take it.
I get what you're saying, and I'll just say this: you're trying to stay at an experiential level with yourself. You're trying to create that environment for both of you to stay in.
Oh, well, where else would you say that? I was going to... That's my point about don't divide that. If you divide the experiential level, everything becomes empty except the experiential level, and there you sit all by yourself, isolated and autistic. That's ridiculous. Nobody means that. But it is important, I think, philosophically, to say I don't think perception is basic at all. I think the interaction affects both of us, and our capacity to define perceptions may not be that good. In fact, I think that's why therapy works. I remember when Rogers posited that the client has to perceive the therapist's acceptance. I don't think so. I think the acceptance enables the client to perceive it after a while. It doesn't start there. So I don't know about why you were talking about subjective perception. It's more like, what did this moment mean to you? How did this moment affect you? And, how did you feel me in this moment? You're calling those perceptions?
Yes.
I see. I wouldn't.
I'd like to say that I think you're pointing to, Joan, the vastness of implicit intricacy, that at any moment there's so much more going on than we could ever say or ever explicate or ever articulate. And that's part of the mystery of our living, that we're living on so many dimensions at the same time, and knowing so much that we could never, and even contradictory things, right, at the same moment. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, Ruth first, and then let's hear Ruth first. She's got the mic, and then we'll give it to you, Jane.
Oh, okay.
Ruth.
I'm a little stuck on something, so I just want to ask you. In that example that you were speaking about earlier of being different when you walked into the therapist's office.
Yes.
And Lynn described it as sort of a new way of being
Yes.
that came through the we of the relationship. And your sense was, response was, no, it's not about new. It's about something that had gotten essentially cut off. And there's something I don't know exactly
Yeah,
the
that's good to
question.
put your finger on. I would take back how I said that,
Uh-huh.
but I would also still not agree that it's new. I think anything that's worthwhile is really me. But really me is not a content. It isn't as if at a certain moment you could write a book and that would be me, and then this thing is new. It's that the new is me. It continues me, develops me. That
So there's something about both that, taking that which perhaps was cut off in some way, or not have I don't know what the word you might use for that.
yeah,
And how to, and the living of that now, which is a bringing forward
Yes.
of the furthering development of
yes, yes.
of self
Yes, yes, and that's why I think development like that could just as well be called new as called you. Development like that is what we want, is why we're here. It's not right that we're here just to learn how not to be here, sort of. If you can go directly to something ultimate, go, but come back.
Well, it's that those moments that we know in focusing or therapy or whatever, where it's both, oh, this is new and I've known this forever.
Yes, exactly. That's right, exactly.
That's very nice,
Exactly.
Ruth. And that's the special thing about the word development, that it has the new and it has the
Yes, that's
sense
right.
of continuity. Jean?
Yes.
Well, I wanted to ask about something that's what you just talked about. Maybe you've already answered my question, but I'm thinking of, you said, yes, when I went into my therapist's office, it was me. And my next step is to read you a short, my favorite quote.
Okay.
We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of our exploring is to find the place where we began and know it for the first time. You may have heard that.
Eliot.
Yes,
And
yes.
what I'm wondering is, how do we talk about the connection between that wonderful sense of recognition of self and the developmental dimension?
Well, I call that carrying forward, and it becomes mostly my basic principle, because I want to get past everything just is. I think in one respect there's no is. The is only from a point of view of being stuck or trying to define something. It's always is with an impetus. And the old model cuts off the impetus, and then you're just a what. And then some other day you're another what. And then we have this big problem about the continuity or the development or the recognition from the further what to the previous what. And I want to say living is carrying forward. Living is not an is. It's not like a machine or a computer that just has this is. Living is always further. Somehow we are expanding the universe. And they want to treat that as if it were just mere nuances, mere detail underneath something that is just as good without us. And I don't think that's true. I think each person that comes is such a completely different universe that, everything has a different meaning. And when we can understand each other for a moment, that's very exciting. And understanding is not just understanding the what, it's carrying it further. To be understood is not just to be understood, but to be seen, be understood, be related. Aufleben, they say in German. This happens. So yeah.
Co-creative.
I think it's time for us to take a break. We've held you for quite a long time here.
I agree.
So we're going to have some wonderful food that Ann Shola and Calliope prepared for us. And we'll be back here in about 15 minutes to resume. when we come back, if you have the quote that you would like Jean to talk more about, and perhaps we want to say something before the demonstration, and before even that, while you're thinking about whether you would demonstrate, we need somebody to be okay with Charlotte filming this, and the person who is demonstrating also needs to hold this mic, which Charlotte will, you just have to hold it like this. a little awkward, but I've lived to tell. It's not too bad. So anything that you want to bring, maybe we could even do 2 demonstrations. We'll see. 2 short demonstrations would be nice. I don't know if we'll be able to do that, but let's see how that goes. Okay. Jean wants to say something?
You and I want to say something.
You start.
Maybe you heard me talk enough. Why don't you say what you have, and I'll come in if I have to.
No, you say what you, of all the things we say, what you want us to say.
Well, hello? Is it working? Hello?
Oh, you want to?
That's working.
Hello?
Sound coming out.
This is Charlotte's. This is for Lynn. This is for you.
Hello? Yeah, that works.
Jean stole my microphone.
You started with, can you see who that is? Why don't you stand up so they know who I'm summarizing?
Just tell us your name in case anybody doesn't know.
My name is Stephanie Strickland.
With the question, so what's wrong with co-creation? Inasmuch as we're certainly, all of us, affected by everything and everybody, and the closer the people, the more we're affected. And the infant in the womb is affected for quite a while before they ever get born. And we ended up with the proposal that we might call it co-emergence rather than co-creation. And that really takes care of a big thing. Because co-emergence doesn't deny that there is an individual there. That newborn stares at you when it first comes out, the very first day and minute. There's somebody there. And yeah, sure, they were affected by what went on in the womb for months, but they're not produced by what went on in terms of the effects of the mother on the womb. They're affected by it, all right. So then we went to compare those people to animals and machines, and we both know, it turns out, that while computers are supposed to not be able to do that, computers are supposed to consist entirely of what you've fed into them. And as long as you think of the way computers are supposed to work, no, they're not like that. The computer can only produce what you built in, combine it some way. But it happens that computers do things that nobody built into them. And so it goes on down. Okay. The other thing is, there's a question here, if I'm asserting that there is such a thing as a person, there is a question here, what is that? And I insist on the right to assert that there is a person, even though my concepts about what a person is are not very good concepts. I don't want somebody to say there is no such thing just because the concepts are no good. Like for me, they don't get to say there is no unconscious, look at the absurd concepts. No, the concepts are no good, but there is an unconscious. And that goes for many things. For years they insisted scientifically there's no such thing as an orgasm. Well, fine, but they didn't have good concepts for it. And I don't mean to make a metaphysical mystery out of it, because I am one of these things. So it's not like I don't know what it is. But then again, my concepts about what a person is aren't very good. So that's all. We settled for co-emergence instead of co-producing.
Yeah, it's over conversions, but also I wanted to mention that in terms of the original question about what the goal of therapy was,
Yeah.
and how it might differ from the goal of parenting or teaching or some other goals, which seemed also to want to maximize what the person was that in the therapy session, it was the sole goal of those two people in that time, whereas the teacher and the parents and so forth had other responsibilities.
Yes,
intertwined.
and I feel that I would like to help bring about a world in which the reality of the other person and the other people is put ahead of all the other purposes. But I don't mean that there aren't other purposes. So when I teach class, I know that I have to get so the kids can pass the exam. And I know I have to do that. Even so, I'm willing to be delayed by caring about each person and what are they thinking and how did they get to that. And I like to maximize their capacity to think, which is also a second purpose. So when I'm trying to maximize their capacity to think, if I again get signals back from the person that I'm violating them, I stop. But there are all these other purposes. There's child raising, and there's, in sports they tell you to leave your problems in the locker room. Well, that's great. They know that if you leave the problems in the locker room, you'll perform much better. But then they don't tell you how to do that. Well, I feel like we know how to do that. We may not be able to tell you in 1 minute or 1 day, but we know how to leave the problems in the locker room. But it didn't occur to them that they don't know how to do that. So yeah, there are all these other activities. I would like to see being in touch with yourself as part of all the activities that we do. That's a world that would be good to live in. That's like I'm done. John Harvey says he wants a world that didn't waste so much of what each individual can be. I really like that.
I want to thank Stephanie for that co-emergence. I mean, that may solve us lots of time with arguing over the next 20 years.
You just solved her gene problem.
Right, solved my gene problem. So Sharon would like to demonstrate with Jean a supervision question, but you're going to be the subject of the supervision, right?
Sure.
Yes, come right up. I'm going to change.
And you see then, supervision is not the same process as therapy, and it isn't the same to me either.
And it is.
And it is.
And it is. I'd like to see the ways it is. I'd like you to be. I'd like you to be with Sharon as you would be with.
Hello.
Hello. I don't know what this is about. I've been involved with focusing now for 4 to 5 years. I've had some powerful, deeply moments that I still carry with me. One was with you over at the blood bank. I had a question, and if my life were at stake now, I couldn't tell you the content.
That's right.
It was very important to me.
You have the you of it.
But in asking the question, I got hit here. And the experience wasn't what I'd expected. I felt your presence. I had this, he is really interested. So it hit home the importance of my presence when I'm with people in a powerful way. Yeah. So the process of focusing has been a clarity of the best of moments of an ongoing growth and development in myself. But it's been some awful moments. And my struggle, where I'm troubled and confused, is in how to handle these difficult moments. I am a child of fairly extreme emotional neglect, which makes me very, very sensitive, more sensitive than I'd like to be to misattunement or an absence of attunement, and they're different. So in the ongoing training to become more skilled, when I'm acutely sensitive when the listener is feeling caught in the method, anxious.
This is now a therapist who's helping you?
I wouldn't. No, we're listening. We're doing training. Partnerships.
Oh, okay.
So there are partnerships with people who are therapists and partnerships with people who are not.
So you very easily pick up their tension and their fear or whatever.
That's right. And I don't want to hurt feelings.
You don't want to hurt their feelings.
That's right. But it interferes.
Oh, sure.
So when I know what it feels like to have been listened to, where there's I can't put my finger, I can't find words.
Well, at least you're saying, and I think at least, you're saying more than that, but at least that when you have a tense, fearful, something or other, upset listener, then what goes on in you cannot be like when you have an open listener. And it very well demonstrates the identity of relating and focusing. But I wouldn't expect you to. Would you expect yourself to be able to focus the same way?
Well, it shifts into, as I've been trusting the process more. If I am really genuine, authentic, I would say, I hate this.
Yes. Yes. Well, you hate it anyway, even if you're not genuine.
Yes.
And that's a bigger point than the joke. And what I mean is, that which I can't accept in myself is already true. So I don't really have to accept it. It's already true. But anyway, I follow you.
It's better. It feels better.
If it were just entirely for you, then you could say it.
Exactly.
But you have to consider the other human being too, so you don't
That's right.
that.
So, no. So it's a troublesome point of, do I just, is this just me with myself saying, I hate this moment, and I'm going to put up with the other person, the listener.
Yeah, right. And there you could go in further a little bit. I could just say back to you, but more for the purposes of holding on to it. I say this kind of thing all the time. I will say this back to you, I say, so that we can stay with it, and then see what's actually, why you hate it so much. Is it because it should be different? And there's a guess of mine, but it's only an invitation. Something in you hates that.
Okay, and I even hate that.
That's a whole step.
Okay?
That's a whole step. You not only hate this moment with that tense person, but you also hate hating it. Is that what you meant?
No, I hate a reflection like that.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know what that's about, but I do know that's a pattern.
Well, let's go see what that's about, because I would like to know that too. Now, was that an invitation to focus, or was that a relational thing? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't care.
No, I know, I'm interrupting you, and I apologize.
No, I agreed to this. I'm just giving a feedback. I don't really care about
I bragged
that.
about how I would forget about them, and now I'm not forgetting about them, so I don't feel so good about that. But okay,
Okay.
you don't mind.
I can only get in touch with an irritant.
It's an irritant, that's what it is. It's a feeling of
Right
being
now, that's it. Yeah, I
irritated.
don't want,
It's again the same thing.
it's the same, I don't like the mirror.
Right.
Yeah, I don't need to hear,
You're telling me not to do that. Okay.
right, no, but somehow I don't need to hear my exact words or anything. I just want you to take it in.
Okay.
And I can't, there's confusion as to why it would bother me.
Well, it feels good to me that you're doing that, because it's the opposite of the thing where you're stuck trying to accept the other person the way they are, and you're just supposed to make the best of it. And here you're actually telling me, don't do that. And I ain't going to do it for a while at least.
Yeah, well, I already have a sense you're strong enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can
Yeah,
take
you don't need
the,
that either.
no,
You didn't mean that?
I don't need what either.
My being glad that you can do this here.
No, I need that.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, that's different because, there's a person there.
Aha. This reflecting business feels to you like there's no person there, just a parrot or something. That's not them. It's giving you back yours.
All right, I hadn't noticed this before. I'm not sure of this. I don't fully trust
Okay.
my own sense, but it's sort of an inkling that if you just parrot back, it's an intrusion. And I want to know there's a person.
So I don't know what to say now, but I like it. I take it in. I'm not
Yeah.
going to repeat it, but I got it.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to know that I can trust you on that. That,
Okay, you can trust me to be here and not just to stay inside reflection. I don't know if you can trust me not to reflect because I do it so constantly that I might do it again, but I don't intend to.
that was different. Because you were reflecting, you were engaged, the me.
You could feel me in that.
I could feel you in there.
Because if you reflect back, then you're messing into my business in some sense. Whereas if I hear from you, that's you. Is it like that?
If I have something from you where I feel I exist for you, I've touched you, I've gotten to you, yeah, I feel more present.
Ah.
If I'm just getting my words, even though I trust you're feeling your way along to stay checking in on the attunement.
Then you're over there by yourself,
Yes, I'm,
floating over there.
yes,
I get it, I get it.
yeah, okay, that's good.
I get it, and it's real interesting because it's the reverse of what I would have said, and yet I understand it very well.
Okay, well, I don't know what you would have said.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't
Yeah. See, that gets me interested.
Oh,
See, that-
okay, well, I'll tell you afterwards.
but no, I like that, and
You meant by getting interested that it was a good thing I did.
Yes,
that you
yes,
didn't
yes,
have
no.
to hear it this minute.
Again, I feel like I exist.
Sure, makes sense. You exist in the interaction. You
Yes,
exist by touching
right.
me and seeing that you did.
All right, so now here's a moment where I'm not sure if I'm doing something in my interest, in my own development or not. Almost from the beginning of my work as a therapist analyst, I have wanted to come from someplace inside. If I hadn't lived it, I don't know when I came up with this, but if I haven't lived it, I can't do much for somebody else. So from I think my anxiety, my fear is that since I know the difference between the skilled therapist listener and the less skilled, I put myself in that second group.
That I haven't understood. The skilled therapist is the one that you hear, you feel him, her.
Yeah,
you hear.
you're skilled. I can feel,
That's what
experience
skilled
you're
is.
skilled.
See, for us now, that's the word skilled means that. Then it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. And you put yourself in the less skilled group while you're doing
right.
that?
So since I hate those moments of misattunement, if I'm really, I could do my old way, which was in training in hypnosis, I experienced myself with a beginner hypnotist, and I just went thump, and I actually saw the image of a steel door. I stopped listening to the guy, and I went off on my own trip. And I always said, ooh, I saw my dissociative process. Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting? It's a steel door. I think I prefer having the door lifting and having these uncomfortable feelings of, I hate this.
Yeah.
I'm
but
irritated.
Are you hating it as a therapist or as the client?
I'm the client.
You're the client.
Yeah, I'm the one being listened to.
Okay.
But then I put myself, oh, is that how people feel when I'm there when I do it?
Oh, okay.
Why should it be any different?
Well, do you just say back? Do you do the thing you hate? No. I was never trained. That's some of my discomfort with this whole focusing training. I'm adapting it to my own way, which is way I introduce it with, excuse me, can I interrupt you? And I want permission for that. Yeah.
And I don't always get that.
That's fine. But when you get it, then what do you do?
Then I'll say, I want to check something out.
I see. And that to you is better because you're manifesting yourself and your intent.
Ah, okay. Yeah. I hadn't seen it that way. Yeah, because I'm thinking that it might be a pretty simple thing. I really like your foof, foof, foof. See, for me, the foof, foof, foof it's playful, and it's a less intense level of, I hate this.
Yes.
The intensity of it
it's back
is...
to the hate I was also coming back to it, back to the hate. Is that because you're supposed to put up with it? Is that because you're supposed to think it's okay? Is that? But right now you're almost saying why it is. The less intense this thing makes it not so hateful. I think you... No, you didn't mean that. I didn't understand what you meant.
It has to do with what can be handled. I don't know whether it's my own baggage that says I don't think that you could handle my hate.
Yeah.
Although you did.
Yeah, I can, but
right.
It's not clear that the shaky person that you're describing
That's right.
can handle it.
Right. So if I'm sensing there's somebody shaky,
But okay.
for me, it's not a question that can be asked. Can you stand it if I hate you?
Yeah, no, you can't do that. But
No.
does it mean you can't do anything? You're just
No,
supposed to
so
swallow it down?
Yeah, that's been that point that was not clear and was confusing. But I can imagine saying the woof woof, what would it do to you?
Ah, yeah, it's already different.
Right? What would it do to you if I said, no, 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 or woof, 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 woof?
Yeah.
Somehow, woof, 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 woof. I would wait to see if somebody, it tickles my funny bone. And that feels more comfortable. So I would hope that it might tickle the funny bone of the shaky person.
If you didn't just say, oh, that's terribly wrong what you said, or you would simply say, oh, put that aside, I want to tell you again.
I've done that.
Yeah. Yeah, I see. It makes you less hate.
I'm trying, yes. Yeah, I wasn't aware that if I say, no, 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 or no, that's not it, it's the thread into the hate is pretty clear. It's,
It feels like you're expressing the hate. I haven't understood the thread into the hate. If you say, no, no, that's not it at all.
I can experience, I can feel the thread into
the hate is
the
right
hate.
There.
Yeah, that's right. It's bubbling. It's a cauldron.
And what you hate is having to express yourself from the depth to somebody who isn't going to get it. Is that that's a try? I don't mean it.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Yeah, if somebody doesn't want to go there, I want to respect that.
But then it leaves you.
It leaves me, but
Right.
there's something about going, foof, 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 foof,
That lightens it.
that internally transforms it.
Ah.
There's something. Now, I didn't understand when you were doing it earlier that appealed to me. There's something there.
There's something there. And
With the foof, foof, foof,
it's
foof.
not the hate. It's an alternative. It gets you out of having to hate.
Well, I can laugh at myself. There's an element of laughing, a lightness of...
There's a lightness to it, yes.
Of,
There's a laughing to it. It's not so desperate.
Uh-huh. I'm not sure of this. I don't know if it's something that's wanting and we'll try and make something be that isn't because the wanting is so great. But it sort of feels to have the misattunement lighter.
Yeah. The misattunement is not as important. It's not a life issue. It's not.
Right.
I get it.
Okay. With my mother, it was a life issue.
Yeah, there.
So there's something in the lightening of the touch of that moment.
Gets it out of repeating that.
That sets back. Okay, that's baggage.
I'm past that.
Well, I don't know that I'm past it.
No,
I carry
in this
it.
Moment.
In this, that's right. In this moment, oh wait, I can disengage.
Yes.
And it doesn't feel so heavy in, wait, this is just...
I won't get better from that.
No. So, just to... The lighter touch, the foof.
Yeah. It gives you a breath of fresh air there in that spot. Well, that's too much maybe, but it's something. It lets you laugh. It takes away the heavy.
Yeah, takes away the heavy, and that's where I'm testing out the word, whoa, is that... Somehow the word transformation feels a little bit too big deal.
Too big, yeah.
But it's on that movement, so it's in that of development. So something's developing there.
Yes, I can feel that. Something is developing there. And all the words I can think of are too big also. Some freedom, some going free from that, something not life and death, not being unseen.
It's an alternative to having a button pushed. And a reaction.
Right. It's an alternative. Yes, I get it. It's an alternative. I don't have to be re-stimulated on that old thing.
And have the hatred
flood up.
I think it's the rising up. It's the steam is, there's the cauldron there. And the sensitivity to misattunement is, I don't want to give that up.
No. That's from the beginning I felt that, but I misunderstood you there. It's the re-stimulating that makes it heavy. It's not that you don't accept.
There's heaviness, but I also think too hot to handle.
Because the other person will, be hurt. No.
Yeah, no.
It's too hot to handle.
It's too hot to handle.
Also.
Yeah, too hot to handle for me.
Yeah, I didn't get it right.
And also too hot to handle in the other person.
It's too hot to handle for the other person, but it's too hot for you to have to,
Yeah, we're just in a focusing partnership.
Right.
Part of that contract is not to be handling all this hot stuff.
Amen. Who wants to live their mother over again?
Right.
To be in a focusing partnership.
Yeah. If my mother, your mother.
Anybody.
Yeah. I mean, we don't want a relationship between our mothers.
Between our mothers.
No way.
That's right. We won't just have your mother, then we have the other person's too, of course.
Yeah, I don't know what your mother did.
Amen.
I mean, whoa. I can't handle my mother. I don't want to have to handle your mother.
Agreed.
So,
I think we're just out of
yeah.
just winding.
Yeah, but it really, okay, so it really gives another dimension as a therapist to be open to the feeling of, whoa, I think this is too hot to handle.
Yes.
And to refine, let me see here about just a light touch here maybe.
Yes.
Just to let a little of the steam, to be open to it. I don't know where that'll take me, but I like it.
That's an opening. It's a direction.
Yeah.
It's not here yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay, thank you.
I think we did okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you.
Oh, I guess we got to talk some more. Yes.
So.
I want to hear from them, whatever they
Yes. What did you notice there? What did you notice, and what happened here?
So I wanted to actually bring this back to the discussion
Sure.
about relationship. It seems that one of the ways in which what happened, one of the factors of what happened, client is discussing something about what happens in relationship and affects sense of self. One of the things that's happening together with Jean is the kind of relationship, not wanting the relationship of being parroted to, but wanting a relationship that has more engagement.
Yes.
So, to bring it back to the discussion earlier, it's not the issue about having focusing or relationship or whether relationship is present or not, but is what kind of relationship.
Yes,
And so-
exactly.
And so, that's more fruitful to think of it in terms of different kinds of relationship as opposed to is there relationship or is there importance there or not.
Well, to me, the relationship needs to be real. So if this person says, for me, your reflecting is not real, the hell with reflecting. What do I want it for? Now, if I wanted to check whether I understand, there's 100 other ways to do that. You can ask a question or you can, anything. So why would I want to do what the person informs me makes them feel alone? That's focusing? No. Right?
No, absolutely. But what's interesting is just simply in terms of describing it. Obviously, focusing will always be within a relationship.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is to notice, it's the point about pointing out something about relationship is not to say that it is or is not in focusing, but to say that maybe clinically it's going to be interesting to pay attention to the kind of relationship, because then it's going to help you get a more productive session, which you did, because you didn't respond by saying no, focusing is this way, but you adapted to the...
But what you mean by kind of relationship doesn't come in kinds. It's a function of this person.
Granted, of course, it's a function of this person, but it's maybe, to the extent, it's absurd to isolate relationship as if it existed in and of itself.
Right, that's right.
But to the extent, the same way as say I have an arm and the arm is not separate from my body.
Yeah.
But to some extent I can describe the arm.
I agree.
This is an attention is paid to the type, the quality, the exchange, the relationship.
And I would say the quality is exactly to have the other person real. That's the quality. Not whether it's reflecting or something else, but to have the other person real. So when I get she could actually say it, but when I get a hint that what I'm doing is relating, but not where the person really is, I don't want that. That's not the kind of relating I want. The kind of relating I want is the kind that has focusing in it, sort of, without separate time for it. So another way to say it is what he said about an authentic relating, meaning the person can be authentic in it. And that's what you meant too, I think.
Right. So in a way, you're carrying forward the focusing in the way you're relating to them.
Yeah, and carry forward the relating in how I'm honoring how they're there, which was surprising to me, but made sense. Yes.
I've been trying to figure out how to say this for the time I've been here, but I'm not a therapist. And
Okay.
I guess one of my questions goes back to your thought on what's the goal of the session and what's the goal of therapy and all of that. What if therapy, or the fact that there's no therapist in the partnership, what's intrinsically different? And I guess I invite both of you to answer that. Is there something about putting therapy in the mix that's making the focusing process, what's the difference? And
What is it? There are big differences. Should I just rattle off some and then we'll see if it satisfies you?
Yeah, I guess.
So one difference to me is that as a therapist, I take a continuing responsibility. And as a partner, maybe I don't. That is, it may be assumed between us that I'm going to be there next Tuesday, the same as tonight, but that's about it. Whereas as a therapist, I've assumed a connection with another life, with another person. And to me, that means I've got to bring in whatever I know about that could help. So there's certain things I know exist, but I can't do them, so then I send that person to somebody. I say, look, I'm not going out from under you, but this week go to this person. She knows how to do energy in a way that I don't, or whatever it is. But whereas the other flip side of it is, if the partner misunderstands you and tells you something stupid, you just get rid of the partner or something like that. But you don't get as hurt as you do when your therapist, even of some years standing, tells you something. You try to make it all right, you try to figure out how it could be true, and all the time you know that it's not. So therapists are much more dangerous than partners. Now the public thinks the other way. A therapist is supposed to know what they're doing and the partner doesn't. But the partner says something stupid, you're not.
That's great. Thank you.
Yes. And then somebody back there did you want to say something? Yeah. Say something and then bring her the mic afterwards.
Okay. What I was observing in terms of the whole beginning, when there was like no, I don't want the mirroring, I don't want the reflection. What seemed to me a constant was that you were continually trying to understand, well, what's that? The mirroring. What about the mirroring is not good?
Sure.
What is it you're not liking?
Sure.
What's in there that makes it bad? And then how can I, also with the intention of what can I do that would make it good? Because that was clear too. What was interesting was after a period of time when we got to what it was that was missing in there wasn't a sense of the person there, responding, being present, being affected. Toward the end, you were pretty much reflecting.
Yes.
And it was okay. At that point, it seemed to be okay.
Sure.
So something had gotten understood. And once
Well, I didn't think I was reflecting. I thought I was doing the same function. But I was actually asking questions, and I was making comments, and I was saying how I understood it.
You were checking your understanding out
Yeah.
with her.
Yeah.
Is that different from reflection?
But you can do that. You can say to somebody very sensitively, I think you're saying da-da-da-da-da, or you can say, Jesus Christ, that would piss me off. And it's still a reflection. Especially if you don't mean to shift it over to yourself.
Oh, okay, you're still staying with the person.
Yeah, you're sharing the anger that she didn't quite have or whatever. Instead
I
of
was-
saying, aren't you angry?
I was noticing how you very caringly kept putting yourself explicitly into it so that it wouldn't feel the way she didn't want it to
Yeah,
feel.
but it felt...
So each thing
yeah,
that you
yeah.
would say, what we call an I statement,
Yeah.
along with
Yeah, but it's
some
actually...
checking out.
Yeah, but it was also a kind of vacation for me. It was like I was permitted to make I statements instead of very carefully making sure that I've only got what they mean. Here I was welcome to...
So it was good for
let
both of you.
Let it
It
flow.
was
So
a
I did-
vacation for her too.
But I didn't think, I just knew that, I did think that sort of, but not, I wasn't asked to very caringly manipulate myself in my responses. I was given permission to let myself be more present, and I know how to do it. I worked most of my life at being visible. And so if somebody says, be visible, no, sure, I'm right there. But yeah, you're right. Yes, back there.
I thought that was fascinating.
Hold the mic a little closer.
It's not there yet.
Oh, no wonder. There we go.
Yeah, I thought it was fascinating, and I think the sensitivity of the subject, so to speak, oh, yeah, I thought the sensitivity to your feelings was really fascinating.
Her sensitivity?
Her sensitivity to her own,
Yes,
the way
yes.
she was able
Oh,
to
yeah.
look inside and
Right.
be sensitive to her own feelings, I thought was fascinating. What I was puzzled about and intrigued about is when she said it's, when you said that it was felt intrusive.
Yes,
somehow.
yes.
And I thought that was interesting because I never would have thought that, I never would have seen that, I
Right.
never heard somebody else say that.
Right.
And I was sort of puzzled because I don't think that really got explained. I'm not sure, but I felt a little bit that she just let it go nicely, but that
Yes.
was a mystery to me.
Yes. Well, I did what I always do, which is inside of myself, I go looking for that. And I found it right away, but I didn't have a chance to check my way of feeling intruded with her. Well, I did check it briefly, but didn't check out. The way I experience, you want the way I experienced it? What I found, it was also the opposite to me. Because to me, reflecting is not intrusive. I'm always saying, be as close as you can to the other person with minimal intrusion. And here she's saying minimal intrusion is intrusive. So it was very interesting. But when I went inside to look for it, I found it right away. Well, to me it is, well, I said it back to her, but it wasn't right for her. To me it is, when you reflect back, I could feel it as you're mongering into my territory. You pretend that you're doing my business, and so then I don't see you, but you're doing something. What are you doing? You're doing something that I don't see, but you're pretending that I need to hear this, or you're pretending that I'm not okay unless you say it back. Or it's like you're making me feel like a patient. Whereas if you let yourself show, then I'm not threatened. I know where you are, and also it doesn't feel like you're mongering into my business. It feels like I'm part of your business, and you're telling me. But I checked that with her, and that didn't do anything. That's not exactly what she meant. But what about you? How can you feel it as intrusive?
Yeah, and I've never thought of that before, ever. But I mean,
Well, I haven't either in those terms, no.
I haven't either, but I felt I could sort of sense what she said, that
No, many people have said,
words is somehow.
yeah, no, every couple of months there's somebody who doesn't want me to reflect, but it has different reasons. Not intrusive. It's more like, well, I can stand just to say, I can barely stand to say it, I can't stand to hear it back. And I understand that very easily. But that's different. It's quite different.
When what the client is experiencing is a surprise, it makes it even more inviting to listen closely, because you don't know what that is. Like, what's that? That thing that I never came across before. Exactly.
Oh
that
yeah,
way.
oh yeah.
And that's always the case actually with
yeah.
every session. But when it's when you recognize it right away, that's an sorry. That's a nice thing. Do we have another comment?
I just want to say one thing that she said at the very beginning, which is the way I responded to the mirroring thing. She said when she was with these partners who got caught up in the method or the steps of focusing, and she was focusing on misattunement. That's a phrase she used many, many times.
Yes.
And it seemed to me that there was something about the formulaic quality of that.
The
Formulaic quality. In other words, I'm just doing what the steps are
Oh, yeah.
I'm not attuning to her as a person, and that reflected her, what she was saying about the emotional neglect, or, whatever.
Yes.
So that if things like pure reflection, which has an automatism to it,
Yes.
she could respond to it in that way.
Yes, see now that's different. So we all can find, I don't know we all can find, but what we find of how you would feel intruded is different than how I would feel intruded, and probably different from how she feels.
Right. It's just that one point that she said at the beginning about being with people who got caught up in the method, I think is the phrase that you said. Or,
Now wait, you want her to feel the same thing. She might.
No, I'm just saying.
But maybe not.
I'm checking with you. Do you remember what you said? It was sort of like, okay. I was just reflecting a certain phrase that she used when she first spoke to you that I was picking up on when she was talking about partners who got caught up in the method. I think that's pretty close to what she said.
Yeah.
I just want to underscore this idea that we sense into our own experience, that we're, as the therapist, we're focusing into our own experience, which is going to be different than the client. So our implicit intricacy will be different, but that process of sensing into it leads us in a direction that then can be helpful if the client feels us looking for them and trying to find what they're expressing, and that experience of the other one looking for me as a client is a very important experience.
Sure.
I just want to say, when we started, I thought, well, it's pretty obvious what she needs. She needs to say it more politely and not just let her anger out. But then it would be just sort of intellectual.
Sure.
Through the
Sure.
experience.
Sure. Well, that's a good example of how what actually comes out of the person is so different in so many turns that usually I'm always happy that I didn't say the last thing. Now I have the right thing to say. And a minute later I'm happy I didn't say that either, because now we're a totally different world. It had nothing to do with what I was going to say. That's the way it goes.
I want to dovetail on what you said, Jane, because if we're solving the problem, if we're coming at it here's a problem, and I have the solution, she could say it in not such a, a harsh way. She could be more polite. That's one way of coming at it. But the other way, as you said, Jean, they were living through it, so that the therapy session is a living further of the very thing that's being talked about, and then that's on a very deep level, so that she had the experience of going through the feeling of hate with Jean, and then seeing something that helped it, and his tolerating the hate and also going with the thing that helped, and all of these turns of step by step living through that thing, which then reaches back to the original thing in some way and forward to the thing with the partner. So I'm just sort of saying a little bit more than you did about the living it, rather than solving the problem. There's a deeper point.
Yes, and you don't have to lose a deeper point just to try real quick. If you have 10 solutions, don't. But if you know one, just fly it real quick.
Yeah.
And most people are not insulted if that's an old story and they know all about it. Yeah. Yes.
So,
Get the mic.
in terms of living it, what felt very beautiful was the puff, puff, puff.
Yes.
That came out
Yes.
and probably had an influence on the client more than you might have imagined at the time you were doing it. But that had took a life of its own, and felt also like an example of that co-emergence that we were talking about slightly before. The resonance between the two of you.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
that expression, and then that expression in turn taking on its own
Yes.
life
Yes.
to mean more and more.
Yeah.
I love that point.
Yeah. And yet, what it meant to her went on and on in a way that I couldn't have
Yeah.
predicted. Yes.
I guess
Take the mic.
it probably doesn't really matter, but
Hold it. Over
and I'm
Lenny's
sure
head.
this I mean, if I walked in on this, this just looks to me like focusing-oriented relational psychotherapy.
Sure, why not?
I'm sure you both agree with that, because you agree with this in general. It's funny, it wasn't just a living through, it had a holographic quality, because I think, Charles, you pointed this out, that, if you're used to thinking about things psychodynamically and relationally, experientially, what that adds to it is that although Sharon felt invaded by what felt like unempathic responding,
Right.
once she felt that you heard her, then the same thing that had felt unempathic, the same process, was either empathic or not offensive.
Well, that's sort of my...
anymore. So it's living beyond the whole.
Yeah, well, that was my...
seminal theme.
Yeah, that was my main point tonight. Don't fall for the external appearance of a method. Reflecting is not the point. So it's not, if you really mean the method, then I was not reflecting. Because by reflecting, we mean this empty ritual formula. And consequently, the way I want therapy to be, none of the methods should be done. They're all violations of human real interaction.
I think you use your focusing process as a relational guide.
Yeah.
It's like a divining rod. I think was the way Eileen and
I like that.
someone
Yeah,
termed it that way in our
that's right.
workshop. It's
Yeah.
a divining rod,
Right.
and it's a highly attuned one.
Right. If it doesn't tick, don't do it. Yeah. And you can certainly try it, but then you see that it didn't tick, so then you want to know why didn't it or something. You don't want to. Yeah, yes.
Again, it seems like an ongoing...
Lainey, take the mic.
An ongoing process of resonating. It's sort of like you check with the other, which is what relationship is, because that point of contact
Yeah, that's
you make
right.
at every turn is
That's
a
right.
point of resonance.
Yeah, that's right. And you check for because of the contact, not so much
The contact, right.
check what you are thinking to see that it matches what the person. Sure.
There, right there.
Sure. So that we could translate, you're saying kind of relationship. I'm saying there are two kinds. The method kind and this kind, whatever you want, the co-emergent kind. We started a new movement.
Oh, wow.
I think this ties into a question that I've been thinking about, you use the term real relationship several times. Or
Yes,
a
yes.
real relationship.
Yes.
And I think I'm kind of in agreement with this gentleman here that there are many kinds of relationships.
Yes.
And to characterize some as real and some as unreal may be problematic. I don't know.
No, well, I mean, and I don't know that anybody has to accept the word real is a sloppy word you throw. But what I mean when I say real is that the other person is in contact, and in contact in how they're relating to me. So the result of focusing is that the person is in touch inside enough that they don't violate themselves just for the social rules or whatever it is, and aren't there.
So
And if I can feel them in there, then I call that a real relationship.
So they're in touch with themselves, they're in touch with the felt sense,
Yes,
those kind of things.
those kind of things. And then if they're far away from that, it's worth saying, if somebody is going around in circles and they're totally not in touch with themselves, then I try one after the other everything I've ever learned. I invite them to tell me their dreams, and I see if I can get them to act some feeling, that event that they don't. I'll try everything and anything. Then if they're really here, see what I'm using that really again. If I can feel that they're in what they're saying, but they're not turning to look at it, but they're saying, well, so I went there, but nobody was home, and then I had to walk back, and when I walked back, I met somebody, and I didn't really want to even see them, and then when I got home, I didn't know what to do, so I read the paper. What are they doing? They're telling me a feeling that they really have, but they won't call it something like I was lonely or I was sad that so-and-so wasn't there or whatever it is. That's already different. I can feel that person. So when somebody's going around in circles, I'll try anything. But when they're really there already telling me something, then I want to respond to that. But not in terms of when you walked home, not in terms of you read the paper, but in terms of whatever that was for you, whatever that meant for you. So, I would say, was that you got left all alone? I won't say lonely because the person is obviously avoiding those kind of words. But I could say, so you got left all to yourself? And then if I can see that wasn't it, I say, oh no, I guess I don't know how you felt. But that's an invitation to go tell me, right? So to me there's a lot of difference in what is going on. Then if a person is actually deeply inside already doing something, you can call it focusing if you want or whatever, then I will not pull them out of that process to talk about whatever it is that they were saying situationally. I may have a question, but I'll save the question because they're already in there now. Or if they're the kind of person that's going to go in there, I don't want to lock them to the surface by, people generally start out somewhere. I do as a client.
Right, it kind of sounds like you're calling that less real or whatever, which I guess it is in a way.
The ones that are going in circles, that doesn't feel like real relating to me. There I'm not afraid of losing something. The other types I described are really relating. I can really feel this person, and this person's really looking at me, and I can feel them feeling me, and that's a very real thing that's happening. No?
That's fine.
So there are many kinds of relationships, but to me, real or not real is not like many kinds. It's the degree of being here.
It sounds like the degree of contact or resonance.
Yeah, any of that.
I think we have time for just one more question or comment. Joan, do you want to?
Well, I guess it's a plea for a comment from Jean. This discussion is reminding me of the one-page paper that you wrote in 1986, I think, about research, which really changed, at least for me, and I think for other people, changed the research paradigm from the kind that you were describing before, which went looking in the dark for the wrong thing, to basically saying, to evaluate whether therapy is doing well or not, you have to be able to identify when it's happening.
Yes.
To be able, and that's really what you're saying now. Now, somebody may disagree with you, but I believe this is what you're saying now, is that you and the person you're working with can probably put their finger on the moment in the session when it feels like you're both most present to the emergent process. I just want to say I feel like that paper, which is so beautiful and profound, never gets paid enough attention to, so maybe you could say something about it.
Well, I'm not even sure I know which paper you mean. 86.
I think it was 1986, and it got published in Psychotherapy, Theory, Research, and Practice, and it was a set of principles. You basically said if you really want to study human process, you need to change your paradigm in these following 12 ways or something, and then you laid them out.
Well, I do have that principle is familiar to me. That look, make sure the thing you're studying is in the laboratory. That's the biggest thing. And they so often, the official research methods are such that by the time you divide it by the males and females and the old and young and the this, it's no longer there at all.
Joan, why don't you email us a link to that paper, and we'll all take a look at it, and we will pay attention.
I'll scan the paper and I'll send it to you.
That's
No, well,
fine.
it should be in the Gendlin library. Just attach it for us.
One page, are you sure? Wonderful.
Yeah,
Maybe two.
just attach that
It's very short.
for us. That would be great. I
Good.
just wanted to point out before we stop that in terms of my keyboard, there were several moments of playing on different parts of the keyboard. The moment when Jean and Sharon were talking about this experience of that hate feeling being able to be present between them, and Jean being okay with it, is he sturdy enough, was that point of the ability to talk about you and me, and how freeing it is when something can't be spoken, and then it can be spoken in the therapy with the therapist, and that frees up a whole other thing. The other point on the continuum was of Jean's finding his own metaphors and images for what Sharon was trying to get at, and bringing from his own felt sense, bringing that in, and how that felt both like a contact and a further living for Sharon, as well as a getting closer to what was trying to come forth in them. So I just wanted to point that out from my little keyboard. And any last word you want to say?
Yeah, I want to say I had the good fortune, after ranting here for half an hour about how there is no such thing as focusing if the relationality doesn't work, I had this person who sat down and said, I can't focus when the relationality doesn't work.
That was a great, right? That was a great sequence. Well, thank you all very much for coming and being such a good audience, and hopefully we'll have other workshops with Jean in the future, and make sure that you take all of the flyers and leaflets and everything that we have out for you, and have a lovely evening.
Yes.